You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey, it's me, Michelle. How are you doing? I want to talk today about a very, very important subject called trust. And it's probably one of the most obvious and overlooked subjects in relationships, period. Whether there's addiction present or not, trust is the most fundamental factor of a successful relationship. And it can be disastrous if you don't have trust. So what does trust mean, and what does it practically look like, right? Because we're not some podcast that just does a bunch of woo-woo self-help words. We actually break it down and describe it and dissect it for you so that you can apply what you learn in your life. Because if you're not applying, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're staying stuck. And if you're stuck, you're miserable, right? So let's go back to the beginning. When you first met your loved one who suffers and struggles with addiction. My bet, if I were a betting type of gal, would be that you came into this relationship as an untrusting person. And if I were to take that bet, double down on that bet, take that bet further, I would say you probably came into the relationship an untrusting person due to some traumatic experiences of not being able to trust some adult in your childhood. I'm thinking maybe you had a difficult relationship with a parent, or your trust was violated by a family friend or a sibling in your life. Somewhere along the line in your childhood, you learned not to trust. And so when you found someone who you wanted to partner with for the rest of your life, you were secretly hoping on some probably very subconscious level that they would be able to heal your trust issues, which is kind of messed up, right? I mean, we probably should not go into relationships thinking that somebody else can make up for our past. That's an unrealistic expectation to place on anybody, whether they have a drinking problem or not. So the even more messed up part about this whole situation, if you haven't kind of fast forwarded where I'm going to go with this yet, is that if you are already going into a relationship with trust issues and you're looking for somebody to make up the difference, the lack of, the empty spot in your soul and heal you, isn't it ironic that you chose a person who clearly, in order to continue a relationship with you, has to lie to you about their addiction? In a way, it's kind of masochistic, because how could you, it's not like you chose somebody in your life who is stable and steady and honest and shows up consistently whenever they say they will. You literally fell in love with somebody who, in order for their addiction to survive, requires them to lie about how much they're drinking or how much they've used drugs or where they've been or where they're spending their time or money, right? So you have recreated the relationship with your partner that actually gave you trauma in your childhood or in your past. And that is a sign and a symptom that you have work to do and that you have not healed, because you're following the path that is most familiar to you, not necessarily the path that is the healthiest. You're kind of going through life in neutral, and you go with what you know, what's familiar, what's comfortable, even though it's weird because loving somebody with addiction is probably the least comfortable place, but it does have common denominators. There's a lack of trust that probably reminds you of some traumatic event when you were a child, or when you were a young adult. And it probably has a lot of other unhealthy common denominators that remind you of someone or something that happened in the past. And so that is what made you attracted to this person in the first place, is you're sitting there and you see your history in them and you go, oh, I know that. That feels familiar to me, even if it's an unhealthy familiarity. So you're coming into this relationship with your loved one at the very beginning with a lack of trust. And you're attracted to a person who has to lie to you in order to continue their addiction. And their addiction, let's just flip the coin here on the other side. Let's take a look at the person that you love that's suffering from addiction. That person is also coming into the relationship with a lack. There is a hole. They are incomplete. They have a inability to handle the negative feelings of their past, and therefore have turned to drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. And I think, if I were, again, a betting woman, I would say they came into the relationship with you looking to heal themselves. They secretly thought that you had the answers because you were more than willing to take on the problem. You were the first one to volunteer to help them, to manage them. And so there's a part of them that secretly was placing their hope in you, that you could heal them. And do you see how from the very beginning, this relationship was not standing on solid foundation? It was not built on a solid ground. So why would we think that loving someone that struggles with addiction could eventually work out well if two people are not willing to do their own individual work? I'm not sitting here suggesting that there's no hope for your relationship because you're two unhealthy people that came together and fell in love. Because if that were the case, I mean, go through your list of friends, go through your list of couples. Like, there's not many people who enter into a mutual relationship fully and completely healed, right? So I'm not saying it's impossible for you not to both have a healthy, loving relationship. But what I am suggesting, and this is sort of a universal application for all relationships, is in order for it to eventually reach the summit of success, two people must be willing to do their own individual work and learn not to project their issues onto the other person or look to the other person to help them do their own work, because you will be severely disappointed. Whether it's the person you love, the addict or the alcoholic, or whether you choose to leave and you turn to the next person, people will always consistently disappoint you. So here's the reality of the situation. If you are married to somebody who suffers from addiction, you signed on the dotted line. You entered into a relationship with them and you agreed to this scenario. And until you choose to leave, until you choose to exit, if you do, let's stop waiting for them to do their own work and to change. And let's start growing up and becoming accountable and responsible for the fact that we went into this with a contract and we are going to do our own work. Let's put blinders on to what the other person is doing. So if you are, I love horse racing, guys, English horse racing, not American racing. And there is a difference. And my father, growing up, used to own racehorses. And so I would go as a young girl. A lot of my family lives in England. And so I'd go every summer to these horse races and go over to my grandparents' house in England and stay there. And then we'd go to the races. And it was fabulous. We dressed super fancy and I had sparkling lemonade, which was so fun. But as the horses are getting ready to race, they put blinders on horses. And they're just basically, they go over the eyes and they prevent the horse from being able to see or be distracted by the other horses next to them racing alongside them. So it doesn't actually blind them, obviously, but it blinds them to what's going on next to them, what other horses are doing, because it can be very distracting to the horse. So the blinders are to help the horse stay focused, and it helps them run their own race. It helps them look at the finish line and stay the course and not worry about their peripheral vision of the other horses. I want you to put on blinders when it comes to your spouse or your loved one who's suffering from addiction. Run your own race and see where it gets you. Do not be concerned with your spouse and how fast they're going, how slow they are, if they've dropped out of the race, if they've gotten injured, if they've chosen to never leave the gate of the race, right? Because the horses line up in the gate and then the gate opens and they go, they're off. And the bell rings and the horses run and the mud is flying through the air and it's very exciting. Run your own race. Maybe your loved one actually doesn't even want to get in the gate. Maybe they're like, you know what? Life is too hard right now. I don't want to work. I don't want to work up a sweat. I'm not interested. I'm not even going to enter my name. Okay? Let them make that choice. They have their own autonomy over their own life. It's not your job to convince them to get into the gate. It's not your job to cheer them on. You're not the jockey riding them on top of them and saying, go, go, you can do it. You don't, that is not, I've never actually heard a jockey make that noise before, but you get where I'm going with this. You're not the jockey riding them. You're not steering them. You're not in control of that horse. You're not in control of your loved one. You don't get to dictate when they go, when they stop, and what direction they're headed. You don't have the reins of your loved one. You are your own horse. Ride your own race, and for God's sakes, get in the race and give it your best shot. You have one life to live. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are. I can guarantee you the finish line is worth it because it's completely victorious. And it feels really, really good when you finish and people are cheering for you and you get to recognize yourself as having accomplished something incredibly difficult. And you're going to be sweaty and you're going to be gross and you're going to think, I didn't think I could do this. And it's going to feel amazing. So if you are one of those horses and you are just kind of walking around waiting for your loved one to meet you at the gate, and you're like, let's run this together, we can do it, and your loved one is like, no bueno, get in that gate anyways. Run your course. Fix your trust issues. This is, if we want to keep the metaphor going, this is the race of trust. Okay? This is a trust race. Get in the gate and learn to run. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the only way that you are going to gain back trust in your life is by learning to trust yourself. It doesn't matter if you choose to stay. It doesn't matter if you choose to leave. It doesn't matter. That's the wonderful beauty of it. You don't have to decide today if you want to leave or stay. You can run your race regardless of changing the status of your relationship. You have to learn to trust yourself. Nobody else is going to teach you trust. How do you learn to trust yourself? You do what I told you just 5 minutes ago. You take accountability for the fact that you entered this relationship and that you are actually in charge of your own happiness. You look at this relationship logically. You step out of the emotion part for a moment, and you go logically, what can I do that will make myself happy? When it comes to trust, what do I want? And how can I make that happen? Learning to trust yourself means stepping within, putting on your blinders, stepping within and going, who am I? What do I want? How can I make this situation better? How can I control my life, my feelings, and my future? And then following through with that. So let's give you some examples. Learning to trust yourself means getting a grip over your finances. If you are a partner and you don't have any idea how many credit cards you have open in your name, or you don't know the status of your bank account right now, or you don't know where your money's going every month, learn to trust yourself by getting a hold of your finances. Another way to learn to trust yourself in your finances, open up a separate bank account in your name and start putting money in there every month. I don't care if it's $5 or $20. It will make you feel incredibly responsible and mature to be putting away an emergency fund, because life, when loving someone that deals with substance abuse and addiction, is unpredictable, and that emergency fund will come in handy. I promise you that. And do not tell your partner about it, and do not put it in their name as well. If you are above the age of, I think, 16, you can open up your own bank account. All of my kids that are 16 and older have one. Everybody should have one. Okay? So that's what it means to trust yourself in a financial situation. Trusting yourself when it comes to your future. Okay, so let's take a step back and go, forget your partner, forget the chaos and the drama and all of the disasters that their addiction is causing. Let's separate ourselves from that. And let's ask ourselves, what do we want? Where do we see ourselves in 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years? Where do we want to live? What do we want our environment to be? What do we want to be employed? If so, what would make us happy? What is our calling? What is our purpose? What brings us joy? How do we choose to spend our days? Learning to trust yourself with your body. Maybe it's you have growth to do in loving and accepting your body as is. Maybe you're one of those people that's just never happy enough with the way you look. Maybe your growth needs to be, you know what? I'm actually not going to care what my partner thinks about me physically. I'm going to start to look in the mirror and ask myself, how do I feel about myself? And how do I get to a point where I can actually love and accept myself as I am today? I heard this podcast, and it stuck with me for months, about this woman who was talking about she's always struggled with her weight, and she had this surgery happen, and the recovery of the surgery didn't allow her to eat. So she automatically, or only allowed her to eat soup or something, I don't know. But she lost a lot of weight, meaning, and to her, a lot was I think 4 pounds or something. And she went to her boyfriend. She's like, oh my gosh, can't you tell I've lost 4 pounds? Isn't this great? And he's like, I didn't notice the difference. And what I loved the most about that story is nobody notices the difference. Nobody's looking at you and going, oh, 4 pounds. Wow. It's all in our head, and we're all getting old, and everything is going to start falling down. And that's okay, because we need to stop comparing. And if you're in your 30s or 40s, you'll understand this. We need to stop comparing ourselves to 20-year-olds and going, I found myself doing that the other day, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm 43. This is ridiculous, Michelle. Even though I feel like a 20-year-old in my head. So are we looking to our partners who are sick in their own right and really finding life very difficult and challenging because they're struggling with their addiction? Are we turning to them to make us feel pretty or to make us feel good about our body? And if so, that's kind of messed up. We need to change that. We need to look at ourselves and go, no, I'm going to trust my own feelings about myself, give myself permission to feel pretty, give myself permission to love who I am, and look at all of my physical strengths, and forget about what they think, or waiting for their approval, or waiting for them to notice me, or forget the 4 freaking pounds and just eat the cookie and enjoy life. So that's another way we can learn to trust ourselves physically. We can learn to trust ourselves spiritually. This is a huge one. If we grew up in the church, and I did not, but I have a lot of friends that did, and this doctrine that they have, I see so many of my friends hold themselves to an impossible standard, that their religious doctrine has somehow planted seeds in them at a very young age that is actually harming them. Let's take self-inventory and go, if you're one of those people, what do you actually believe? Maybe not what the church believes or what a pastor believes, but what do you believe? What are you comfortable with? What are you okay with saying about your spirituality? That's huge. And I'm not saying, maybe you say, Michelle, I don't think there is a higher power. I don't think there is a God. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in any of it. Great. Then at least you can have autonomy over that. If you were raised a Christian and that doesn't work for you anymore, that's great. Then own that, claim that. Or if you just discovered Jesus and you're super excited about that, and you're like, I love Jesus. Great, own that. You might be Catholic, you might be Buddhist, you might be Hindu, whatever it is. But what I guess I'm challenging you to do is not to just accept your spirituality as something that a gift somebody else gave you that you're still married to. Instead, take a beat and go, is what I have learned, or maybe what I've not learned, what I'm willing to park on? Or do I need to do some more investigative research about this? Do I need to really ask myself some internal questions? Do I need to, chew on this and wrestle with it a little bit? And really, truly, by you being willing to ask yourself, what do I believe in spiritually, and coming up with solid, concrete answers, that is the highest form of trust for yourself than I could think of. Because you're not relying on a third party to tell you, aka the church, or even some book or some podcast, somebody else telling you what you should believe in. You're asking yourself what you believe in. That's incredibly empowering. So all of these things, they actually result in a massive transformation of trust. They actually really make a difference in being able to stand up for yourself and stand for something. It can be the most liberating thing in the world. And then what happens is, once you start to do this, and by the way, I started to do this because everything I tell you to do, I've done myself. Otherwise, I'd be a massive hypocrite. But I started to do this when I was thinking about leaving my loved one suffering from addiction. So I was in my 20s. And what I have discovered is evolving, is changing. I've changed my mind. And that's the beauty of being a human and living on this earth for as long as we do. We reserve the right to change our minds. So what you believed in when you were 16 is probably very different from what you do now. So we constantly need to continue to take self-inventory. But when we make the time for that, and we keep our blinders on and we run our own race and not worry about anyone else's, what happens is there's this transformation, and you show up in your relationship with anybody, with another human being, whether they suffer from addiction or not, as more of a complete whole human being. You are no longer turning to others to make you feel good or beautiful or complete. You have given that gift to yourself. So you can arrive at the person that you were always meant to be. You have grown into the person you were always meant to become. And you can look at the person next to you, your partner, your spouse, and say, this is who I am. And you can take it or you can leave it. You can appreciate me or you cannot. But this is who I am. And I feel damn good about that. It's taken me a long time to get here, but I have arrived. I have become. And I am absolutely whole, with or without you. You have become dependent on yourself. You have created life skills and life habits that will serve you in any relationship, regardless. It's a beautiful, wonderful place to be, and I encourage you to get there. Get in the gate, put on your blinders, run the race of trust, and the victory will be the most wonderful transformation. And you know what? I'm going to be in that stand, and I'm going to be cheering you on, because I love cheering you on as loud as I can. You will hear me as you are running, and you'll be like, who's that crazy lady in the stands who's like screaming her head off? And you'll look up from your race and you'll go, oh, that's Michelle. Yep, that will be me. And I will not leave you, and I will not let you fail. You are going to continue to run because I will be reminding you that you've got this and that you can do it. And most importantly, I will be reminding you that you are absolutely worth it because this is your one life to live and you deserve to live it well. All right. I hope you found that helpful, and I will talk to you next week. This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with my personal thoughts and beliefs. We are bonded together by the fact that we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.